Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. NHL, NBA, MLB, and so much more. Crazy odds and the best live in play. Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code that you see at the bottom of the screen, or you can head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly.
This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet?
Our guest this week played over 1,200 games in the NHL in a career spanning 21 years. He scored over 400 goals and had 2 40-goal seasons. Was on pace for 3, but we'll talk about that. He's now a broadcaster with ESPN ABC, where he regularly brings hockey to life, sharing his thoughts, insights, and amazing analysis. Rumor has it that he was also a hell of a baseball player in his younger days, and someone even mentioned that you played in the Little League World Series. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. Let's give a big welcome to Ray Ferraro.
There we go.
Hey,
big applause.
Thank
Ray.
you, boys.
Big applause.
Thank you.
How are
Tip
you,
the
Ray?
cap. Tip the cap. Thank you. I'm great. In one of the 300 sunny days a year in Denver, and it is. I'm here for the Oilers Avs game on Tuesday, and I was in Boston Saturday. So instead of flying home to Vancouver Sunday and here Monday, I took a little detour and I got in nice and early to watch the Masters, and which golf is my passion these days, and get to relax for a day or two, do some expenses, and get set for the game.
Do you get to play a lot of golf these days?
I do. I've gotten to a place in my life really that I do one thing for me, and that's play golf. Everything else is either I'm at work, I'm traveling around doing the games, or I'm with my family, which is now, 4 boys, 35, 32, 16, and 13, and 2 grandkids that are 7 and 5. And so wow. My wife, Cammie, and I are really busy with that. And but the golf, I'm telling you, this is why I love it so much, is because it's not like tennis. In tennis, for example, you've got to play somebody of equal caliber. If they're too good or not good enough, the match is no good. In golf, I can play with a professional or a guy just starting, and as long as they're good company, it's a good day. And I compete against myself. Like the guys that go out there and say, I played pretty well and it was okay. And I'm not like that. I try every day to shoot my best score. And if I don't have it, then I used to get really angry. Now I'm like, I'm 58. I'm only so good. I can only get so good, but I love to play. I love it.
I've seen guys wrap their clubs around trees. Did you ever get to that level?
When I was younger, I was I could toss a club. The last time I did, the last time I did that I remember was I was having a disagreement with my wedge, and it just was not working very well. And I sculled a wedge. It went over the green, and I smacked it, and I hit a tree root, and the club broke. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, how ridiculous is that? I just broke a golf club. Now nobody else is affected. I don't have a wedge. I've got to go buy another wedge. Like, what a dummy. And so I still get angry and stuff, but not even close to that anymore.
Okay.
So let's start our discussion today, and thank you very much for joining us. You came into the league in 1984-85, and the league looked a lot different back then, obviously, than it does now. Allan Eagleson was the head of the NHLPA. You're a young guy coming into the league. You had an incredible junior career. One year you scored over 100 goals. What was it like coming into the league? And what was it like for players back then, taking into account the CBA, the rights that players had or didn't have, and where salaries were at that time?
Well, I'll start with myself, and then like give you a little other, a glimpse of what was going on. Was so when I was 17, I left home to play junior. I went to Penticton in the BC Junior League, and this is a great example, I think, of how the world has changed in sports. I went to Penticton because I wanted to get a scholarship to a U.S. university. Right. I got a scholarship to Northern Michigan University in like December. In the early commit period, I committed to Northern Michigan. I didn't know it was my draft year. I thought my draft year was the next year because I'm an August 23rd birthday. Could you imagine a kid today not knowing their draft year?
Not a chance.
So not a chance. They know it when they're 10. So my coach says to me in January-ish, he goes, if you keep playing like this, you're going to get drafted. And I said, where? Like when? And he's like, no, this June. I thought it was the next June. So, I'm playing along. I lead the BC Junior League in scoring by 50 points. And I get drafted in the 5th round. 4 players from our league got drafted in front of me. So you talk about a different time. There was some concern about a 5'9", 155-pound centerman, right? That you were going to be able to compete at that time. So
in the 80s,
in the 80s, it was just it was not the same. And so I get drafted, and for the first year, the Portland Winterhawks, the Canadian Junior Hockey League decided that the host city of a Memorial Cup, that team would be in it. And so the Portland Winterhawks were hosting the first U.S.-based Memorial Cup. And they traded for my rights. And I felt completely full of naivety, like completely full. The quickest way to the NHL now, since I'm already drafted, is not to go to college, but to go to junior. And so they were hosting the Memorial Cup. I thought, like, what a great showcase that would be. So I went to Portland. I left the scholarship on the table, which, I look back and it turned out all right, but I wonder if I would make the same decision today for me, just given the chances of playing pro. Even at that time, I was a 5th round draft pick. I mean, it's not like they were lining up to draft me. Everybody had plenty of chances to pick me. And so I go to Portland. I get mononucleosis like 4 games into the season. Man. I come back like 8 weeks later. I play 10 games. I break my wrist. I'm out for another month and a half. I played 50 games that year. We win the Memorial Cup. And in July that year, I get traded to Brandon in a 5-for-1 deal. I was one of the 5. So again, it's not like people were lining up for me, And as it turns out, you never know when you're in it, but sometimes something happens in your life that is of way bigger consequence at the time than you realize it. And for me, it was getting traded to Brandon because I played all the time. I scored 108 goals. I signed a contract, and I turned pro the next year. Maybe none of that happens had I gone the other way, right? It just worked out that way. And I went to pro hockey, to your question, Allan, and I thought, like, I got 100 goals. I mean, like, clearly I'm going to have a chance to make the team. I was in camp 4 days, and I got sent to the American League. And that was just the way it was. And you had to earn your way back. And I scored 20 goals in like 35, 37 games, and I got called up. And we were a team in Hartford. Emile Francis was just a great, great guy. I just loved the cat. He was such a character. And so they called up a bunch of us young guys and basically said in February, just play. We're going to figure out if you guys are NHL ready or NHL prospects. And you don't have to worry about going back down. We're just going to let you play. So there was myself and Paul McDermott and Ulf Samuelsson and Kevin Dineen. We ended up getting Dean Evison in a trade. Like, this turned out to be a really good group. of young players together. And, our Ronnie Francis was a year older than us, but he felt like he was way older because he was at a different level. But we were just, we just started to play. I had no idea about the CBA, never even heard of it. Like I no idea. Guy gave me a contract. I signed it. I handed it back to him and I went to camp. And if the meal money at camp was $23 a day or $93 a day, I had no idea. Somebody gave me an envelope. I thought that was great. I put it in my pocket and went and played. Like I can't even tell you. I'm sure we had a player rep, but I couldn't even tell you who it would have been in those first couple of years.
What was your process of getting educated and informed about the profession? Did it come from older players? Did it come from osmosis? No. What was the process for you?
Osmosis for sure. Everything changed, I think, for the Union when Bob Goodenow took over. I remember I got traded in November of 90. So you would probably know the time frame, Allan, but I want to say it was November-ish of 89. Bob was in charge. And we had a meeting at Avon Old Farms in Connecticut, where our practice rink was. And so we're all sitting there and we're meeting Bob for the first time. And, I don't know Bob from the next guy. And we know he was Brett Hull's agent. Right. And that's really about, like you say about osmosis, I'm like 6 years into the league by this time. I still don't know really what's going on. And he says, look, we just signed Brett Hull to a 5-year, $5 million contract, $1 million per year. And he goes, in a couple of years, you guys are going to laugh at that contract. And we were like, you are nuts. You're crazy. Like, I think in 1990, I want to say I was making $210,000.
But a lot of guys, well, nobody really knew what other guys were making.
Oh, Allan, if you asked, they wouldn't tell you.
Right.
It was so ingrained. So Bob tells us his story about Brett Hull. And he says, guys, I think the first move we have to make is we have to disclose our salaries. They have to be public. And two things are going to happen. And they're going to happen fast. Number one, the owners are going to tell you you're making a colossal mistake. And number two is the fans are going to get on you guys for the money that you make. Because it's more than what the general population makes. And so we all talked about it. And of course, we salary disclosed. And almost immediately, we were in a meeting saying, guys, this is not the right play from ownership, that disclosing salaries is not the right play. Well, then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, that guy makes $100,000 or $50,000 more than me. And he hasn't even scored 20 goals yet. I've got 20 goals 7 years in a row. Like, what is going on here? It was, I think it was a seminal moment for the collective bargaining awareness for the players. To this day, the biggest issue the players have is they don't pay attention. And we were guilty of it. The players 10 years ago were guilty of it. The players today are guilty of it. And it's because I think you're so in the machine of trying to perform and try to survive. And you think somebody's got your best interests at hand. And in a lot of ways they do, and they're doing the best they can. But most players would not have a working knowledge of the CBA. They just wouldn't. We all knew when our qualifying offers were due. We all knew when free agency started. We all knew when the trade deadline was. But I know the guys now would be more acquainted with waivers and the roster size and escrow. I mean, it's so much more complicated. But man, when I came in, zero knowledge, none of it.
Wow. So in 1992, NHL players went on their only strike in history, just at the end, near the end of the NHL regular season and before the start of the playoffs. and you were one of the players on strike.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that?
What I remember was Bob talking to us about, so we had, back then there was no Zoom. There was, you couldn't just hop on a call. So we had a conference call, and we were in a room. And so everybody's kind of lying around and sitting around, and we're listening to this call about what is so important about players' likeness on your cards, on a poster, on, anything with your likeness. We had no concept of what this was about or what it could be of value for. And so Bob educated us, and quickly, because we didn't really have a lot of time, because the pressure point, of course, was the start of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went on strike, and, the vote was overwhelming. I want to say there used to be a whiteboard in the Players Association offices. I'm not sure if they still have it. And it showed the vote, and it was something to 4.
Right.
And I forget the number. It was big because it was everybody else in the league to 4. And so we went on strike, and within 10 days, we had the rights to our likeness. And it was the first time I think I really understood what leverage was, and when you have it and when you don't. And I was going to find out pretty quickly when you don't have leverage, what happens. And that was a couple of years later. But when we had the leverage, Bob knew it. And I know things went sideways in the future for a lot of different reasons, but I will always be really grateful for what Bob Goodenow did for our players, for us. I don't think the people beyond us could quite understand it, but we came from a place of zero knowledge. Be quiet, move forward, don't say anything. Don't say anything, don't ask.
Don't ask.
Because we didn't even know who to ask.
Question. If you asked a question, you got stepped on.
I got a phone call one Sunday morning. I just negotiated your contract. It's 3 years, $125,000 per year. Okay. And wow. I hung up, and that was the contract. I didn't even know they were talking about it. So everything changed. Everything changed at that time. And that I think it led to conflict between the players and the owners, because for the first time, we were sort of kind of asking questions and understanding that, hey, maybe there's a little bit more in the bucket here for us than what we realize.
And a lot of questions about the pension.
Okay, so when we were locked out, the lockout happened. 94, yes.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe November or December, my dad says to me, calls, and we're talking about it, and he's like, why wouldn't you guys take this deal? It says in the paper that if you play 10 years in the league, you get a pension of $400,000. But it was written in that was your pension, like a yearly payout. And I'm like, Dad, that is not the case. And so it struck me as I look back, that was probably one of the first times I realized that what you read isn't always what the deal is. And
back then the NHL owned the media, right?
Yeah.
The media, there's no internet. There was no, bloggers. There's no, Twitter. All you had was the morning newspaper, right?
That was it. There was nowhere else to go. Yep.
That was it. The morning paper. And the guys who were the beat guys in the key markets were literally bought and paid for by the NHL.
Well, see, I didn't know
openly
that.
Hostile to the players.
We didn't have much
to the players.
We didn't have much support, certainly. That's what that's my recollection of all of that. The players, you should be happy for what you have, and and to move forward with get this deal done and don't kill the season. And hell, we didn't want to kill.
The good of the game.
And I'll tell you, from a player perspective, we didn't want to lose the season either. I mean, I wasn't making very much money as month after month goes by. You know, I'm like, I'm not getting this back. Like, you know, it's not like there's going to be a bonus check that says, oh, here's for time lost. Here's your contract. So when we were talking about pension at the time, it was a defined benefit pension, which meant when you reached pension age, your benefit was defined. I think it was $1,000 a year. That's what our pension was. And then when it switched to defined contribution, and then we would take over managing it, that was a game changer for us, for certain. I mean, you know, again, I don't know. I got a form that said, "Here's your pension." I didn't even, the paper at the time, it had like an orange writing on it, like the NHL orange, and it had, games played and what your number of years or however it was, and like that's what I remember. And you can say it was like honestly, it was the player's fault for not paying attention or not understanding, but our leadership, which at the time, like I don't know, I didn't even know who to talk to. I first of all, at 20 or 21 or 22, I wasn't asking anybody anything. I wasn't asking about the pension. I mean, that not a chance. And it was because, well, I was young. I didn't know. And quite frankly, I didn't care to know. I mean, that's on me. I didn't care to know. I just wanted to play. I was 5 years old. Or 6 years old. I wrote in my grade 1 yearbook that my mom kept, I want to be an NHL player when I grow up. And then here I was 15, 16 years later, and I'm an NHL player. Like, who gets to do that? I didn't care about any of this other stuff. I just wanted to score, because the more I scored meant the more I got to stay in the league. And that's what I was worried about.
Jeez. And you said, I just want to highlight something. Before the players took over the pension, it was $1,000 a year that it paid out.
My recollection is my defined benefit was, I don't think it ever got as high as $2,000, but it was $1,000 a year. And that's so you play 9 years and you're like, oh, it's not, and don't forget, it's not today's dollars, but maybe it seemed like more. I don't know how it could have seemed like too much more, but anyway, you'd be like, oh, when I'm 55, I get $9,000 a year. And
what Allan Eagleson told the players all through the 80s was, you guys have the best pension in any professional sport. So you don't want to push on free agency. You don't want to push on the other issues, because it's going to take away from the pension, right? Something's going to have to give. And you guys have the best pension in professional sports. And in reality, it was a fucking joke.
Well, nobody talked, like, honestly, you just brought up free agency, Allan. In the early days of my career, like in the 80s, like nobody talked about the pension. Nobody talked about free agency. Like it was a non-topic. Like, when are you going to get to be a free agent? I remember Basil McRae signed a 4-year free agent deal. I forget how the hell he got to be a free agent. I forget. But anyway, he signed a deal and it was like a unicorn. Everybody was like, how did that happen? How do you get to be a free agent? Like, I didn't know. Like now everybody, they've got it down to the day. They know when they're going to be a free agent. We just didn't know. And it's easy to say we should have asked and we should have inquired and we should have been more engaged. Like, it's easy to say all of that. We just weren't.
Sure. But you played also during the 90s where 94, 95, there was the half-season lockout. Gary had come in and his marching orders when he came in, he was the guy who ran the cap in the NBA. And in 1994, come in, he had just taken over a few years previous after the strike, and the owners showed John Ziegler the door because they weren't happy with the way the strike resolved, with the players getting their name, image, and likeness, and creating a group licensing program. So they bring in Gary Bettman as the NHL's first commissioner, and his job, his only job, was to get a salary cap in 1994. And he said he was going to deliver it then. And you were one of those guys locked out.
Right.
So do you remember that time well, and what can you share with us about that time?
Well, I do remember it really well. But for, my attention to the lockout, here we were, I was with the Islanders, we're locked out. At a certain point, it became clear, we were skating 5 days a week. Then we were skating 3 days a week. And then we're like, what the hell are we skating for? Nobody's even talking, And so I went back home to trail because my dad was sick. And my dad passed away that December. And my attention to what was going on was clearly divided. I had my focus was really somewhere else. And Dad passed away on December 28th of that year. And at some point, there just became, we'll do the best in the deal that we can. And the salary cap talk is not ever going to go away. I think we were all well aware that it wasn't coming in, and it was just like somebody dropping an idea in, and then it was going to go away. It felt at the time like a really, really big, heavy thing that we didn't understand. That the salary cap sounds like just a term, and then eventually you realize there's no side doors to it. There's no, we can sign a deal that doesn't count on the cap, because we were all talking about that sort of stuff, right? What did we know? We knew nothing. And so what I do remember was when I was riding the bike. We owned a concrete business by this time. My dad, his brother, and their dad started in the 40s. And so my brothers were now taking it over. And so I was in the storage room of the concrete business, riding the bike, when the news came over the radio that the deal had been agreed to. It was early January. And I honestly, I remember breaking down in tears because, I just lost Dad, who was the most significant person in my life. And I was going to get to play again, the game that honestly, I loved playing so much that I think this is the biggest detriment to any player negotiation is we all love playing so much. We'll do just about anything to play. And so the ups and downs of that, Bob was adamant, no cap. There was a way to do this deal without the cap. And so, everybody can be all in all the time in September. But when you get into the middle of November, all in all the time that's not the way it is.
Especially guys at the end of their career or who might be in the last year of their career.
They know what's coming. They know what's coming. If we wait much longer, whatever the system is, it's not going to involve me. They're going to move to the young guys, to the older guys are going to get shoved along. And it happens every year anyway. Older guys finish their contracts, and every year, what is it, Allan? 75 players or 80 players you never hear from again. They're just gone.
Right. But they get paid their last year.
Yes. And
versus
these guys
being asked to not get paid, a half a year or longer.
And it's a little bit, you do it for the, for the younger guys coming along. Well, that's great, but the younger guys aren't going to send you a check. You're just going to be one of the old guys that leaves. And that became a really contentious part of the whole negotiation internally was that there was a group of players that were well aware of what this was going to mean to them. Each time we stayed out, each paycheck we missed, they were well aware of what that was meaning to them.
I had a player who was at the end of his career in 94, 95, and he said to me, one of the proudest things, Allan, for me at the end is I could have been selfish. I could have said, you know what? I was a leader in the room at the time. And I could have said to the guys, we got to play. This is not right. But you know what? He said, I believed in Bob and the people working at the PA, and I believed in the cause, he said. And my generation, he said, we passed our torch to those guys, and we did right by them. We did, because I could look at every one of those guys in the eyes and say, we didn't sell you guys down the river for my last season in the league. We did right by you guys. And he said, and one of the proudest things for me, Allan, was after I retired, watching salaries explode over the next decade from around $300,000 a year average in 93 to 1.83 million in 2003 average.
And whomever that player is 100% correct, because there were players, again, the all in all the time, it doesn't happen in a labor negotiation, but there was a group of players who knew they weren't coming back, and they did not. There was no pressure at that time, as I recall, that the cap is what we need to take. Like there was no pressure from the older guys. For me, in the middle of my career, look, losing the money, that sucked. It was brutal. And losing a part of at the time it turned out to be a part of a season, but it could have been the whole thing. That sucked. You only have so many years, and then you're out. But I had time, assuming the deal was going to be better than the one we had, which I think we all kind of felt it was going to be, mainly because we didn't really know what kind of deal we had anyway. Back to our ignorance. I had time to make that money back up. It was different for me. In 1993, I was 29 years old. I was going to, as it turned out, I was going to play 8-9 more years. So that was a different thing. When we agreed to it, there was a collective sigh. Mm-hmm. But I forget the length of the deal, but it felt like, okay, now we can play and not worry about this for a while. That was the next realization of it.
Right. So let's talk a little bit. Let's move away from this era, and let's talk about your second amazing career, and that is as a broadcaster. How did that happen? How did you start thinking near the end of your 21 years in the NHL that broadcasting and being on air is something you would want to do?
Allan, I got so lucky. I got so, talk about being in the right place at the right time. So I'm playing for the Islanders. I signed as a free agent with the Rangers. I'm there 54 games. I scored 25 goals, and they trade me to LA. Okay. So all of those things are important, though, aside from me being really pissed off that I got traded. And then them saying, Neil Smith saying in the press after that I was too small to play in the playoffs. I was the same size 9 months before when he signed me. I didn't get shorter. Right. But anyway, so I'm with the Islanders. Going on at the same time, of course, ESPN is growing into this colossus. Right. And they had the NHL rights at the time. The head of talent at ESPN2 was a man who just passed away, Barry Sachs, just a larger-than-life, hilarious, gigantic New York Ranger fan. Loved the Rangers. So he's in New York. He lives in Connecticut, but he's a Ranger fan. I was always a talker. I'm doing interviews and stuff all over the place, and I get traded to LA. So he calls my agent somehow, and they ask me, would you like to do NHL Tonight for the first round? Well, I've never been on TV. I don't know anything about it. So while I was playing, I always thought I would get into coaching or management, although more coaching at that time. So I go in there. I mean, I literally have no idea what to do. They're talking about where the highlights are coming in and what you have to. I get no idea. But I guess it went pretty well because the next year they asked me back and I stayed for a month. So while I was in my first career, I was building what was going to be the foundation for a second career, but I was kind of doing it as a sidelight. The fact that I got traded to LA and our team sucked at that time, we never made the playoffs, was the door opening for me to have an opportunity to try this out. And what I found was I really liked it. I liked it. I liked being on the air. I liked, hell, it was easy to talk about. I was playing against everybody. I knew all the players, right? Yeah. And so at one point, a couple of years later, we're playing Detroit, and Yuri Fisher has got me. Yuri Fisher was this giant 6'5" defenseman who had a heart episode and literally was saved in Detroit. The doctor who I've gotten to know, Dr. Tony Colucci, is just an amazing man. And he sprung into action and literally saved Yuri's life in that moment. But at this time, Yuri's got me pinned over the back of the net. And I assume my feet were kicking because he had me, pinned there. And Steve Yzerman skated by and said, hey, Ray, why don't you analyze that? And then he kept on going. and I was like, yeah. Oh, there you go. So it was great. And he didn't, in Yzerman fashion, no smirk or smile or anything, just went right by, laid the grenade down and kept on going. And so I never thought about a second career. I just, once I got into it a few years, I was, getting really good feedback. And so I thought, well, whenever I retire, I'll try and get into the broadcasting, but I still wanted to coach. I still wanted to be involved in the wins and losses. And my last year of playing, I was in Atlanta, then traded to St. Louis. I went through a separation and got divorced. And my ex-wife was moving with our boys, who were 13 and 10 at the time, to Vancouver. So wherever she was moving, I was moving because I wanted, I was going to be near the kids. And then 1 year turned into 3 to 5 to 7. And, pretty soon this is 20 years I've been doing it.
Are you missing your favorite show because it's not available in your region? Trying to keep your private time private? Well, let me introduce you to NordVPN. If you're bored of Canadian streaming services, why not take the UK for a spin? Using NordVPN, it's just the click of a button. You can do just that. No need to travel to Japan for your favorite anime when NordVPN brings it right to you. With over 5,000 server options, no show is out of your reach. Using our link right now, it's nordvpn.com/agentp. You can receive a huge discount on a 2-year plan and 4 free months. We love to binge, but privacy is also sort of a big deal, right? So NordVPN keeps your information encrypted. You'll never have to worry about your IP or your location getting out. They've also doubled down on keeping you safe with new threat protection technology. Say goodbye to intrusive website ads and malware. Even if you download an infected file, threat protection kicks in and deletes it before it makes a mess of your computer. And don't forget, there's literally no risk to try this. It's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Give it a try. If you like it, great. If you don't, they'll refund you the money, and you can pretend the entire situation never happened. Check out my link. Again, it's nordvpn.com/agentp to get your subscription started today. Get exclusive NordVPN access. Right now, it's nordvpn.com/agentp. It's risk-free, 30 days, and your money back guaranteed.
So let's talk about a little bit of the way people's lives intersect with others. Your brother-in-law, Don Granato, is the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres.
Right.
Your wife is the assistant GM of the Vancouver Canucks. Several years back, Tony Granato was assistant coach in the NHL, then head coach at University of Wisconsin. He's now not there, but everybody seemed to be involved in hockey and different, whether it's coaching or management. How do you interact with, your family with all these different things going on?
Well, I often joke the Granatos could work for the CIA because, I don't hear anything. I'm not even kidding. So one summer day, Cammie and I have taken the kids, who were little at that time, on a little vacation. We're in the hotel. It's in the morning. She's lying in bed. I've got the kids. She's just kind of relaxing. I get a text from John Butchergross, and he says, "Hey, is Tony going to the University of Wisconsin?" And I text him back, "I got no idea. I haven't heard." So I kind of yell into the bedroom, which is, 20 feet away. "Hey, Cam, is Tony going to Wisconsin to coach?" And she comes up with this mumble jumble. It doesn't even make any sense. And as she's dancing around this, Bucci texts again, and he goes, "And Donnie's going as an assistant." And so I go, "And Donnie too?" I'm like, "What is wrong with you people?" And so the Granatos keep things pretty tight, right? It stays pretty tight. And so fast forward to today, when Cammie works from home rarely, in the off season when she's doing work not from the office, we have this kind of an office sort of a activities thing for the kids' room. It's not very big, but anyway, it's just off the living room. When she closes the barn door, that means do not open it and do not listen to what's on the other side of the barn door. And so I will give you this, and I'm not making this up. I'm doing a game this year. I'm between the benches, Washington and the Rangers. It's in Washington. One of the Rangers people tells us that they have just traded Vitaly Kravtsov to the Canucks. It's during the game. So I send Cammie a text, and she was at our kids' soccer game, at Riley's soccer game, and I said, "Kravtsov?" with a question mark. She texts back, "What about him?" So I send her a note back. "The Rangers just told me you guys traded for him." And she goes, "Oh, I didn't know it was out yet." There's nothing. I got nothing. Nothing. So it's really they're just, the Granatos have 6 kids. Mom and dad live in Chicago. We went back for a family reunion in Madison last year. And I'm telling you, it's almost it's like an old Italian movie with the family. There's 40 people kind of hanging all over the place, and they're playing board games here, and people are in the lake over here, and people are in 4 different conversations here. It's the parents, it's the kids, it's the grandparents. Now it's the great grandkids.
Wow.
It's really a really incredibly close family. And here's the other thing. I'm an A-type. Everything neat. Everything's got his place, right? The Granatos, they don't operate that way. So the first vacation the first vacation I go to, we were their mom and dad rented a kind of like a vacation home. So instead of everybody getting hotel rooms, we all stayed in this one house. And I was working the Stanley Cup playoffs at the time. It would have been like 2003 or something like that. So Cammie picks me up at the airport. We come to the house. I walk in the door. There's 50 pairs of shoes. They're all over the place. and I can feel like, ugh, look at this. And so like, I'm kind of straightening up and she's like, it's not going to work. It's just, that's not how we do things. So they're an incredible family.
You mentioned being between the benches, and I believe you were the first, if not one of the first, to go between the benches on a broadcast with Gord Miller up in the booth. What was that like for you? Because up until then, it was always, the broadcasters with the play-by-play guys sitting next to each other up in the press box. And here you are on ice level on the other side. The interaction when you're in the press box, you're looking at each other, you're making hand signals. There's a lot of communication going on that becomes unspoken. How do you handle that when you're on the other side of the rink at ice level?
Well, initially you're stepping on each other's toes a little bit. And, I talk when the play-by-play guy's not quite finished yet. And that, I know the viewers don't like it. We hate it. Like the broadcasters, like we can't, I thought I read that differently. And now I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing over the years, Gord and I have done about 700 games together.
Wow.
I can tell when Gord's taking a drink of water. He can tell when
juniors, everything,
like
right?
Juniors, like every year we do 30 games at the World Championships in 17 days.
Oh.
And Gord had 2 jobs. He had to do the games. Well, 3. He had to do the games, compile the rosters. That was the second job. And the third job was make sure that I didn't get lost. Because it's not a strength. Everyone says, know your strengths and, play to that. Direction, punctuality, not my thing.
Just got to manage your weaknesses, Ray.
Yes, Adam, 100%. That's mine. So that communication is can only be built through repetition. Because you can't signal up there, hey, I'm going to talk, right? But I will say this, I so much more like being between the benches than upstairs. And there's a few reasons. I see things differently downstairs. I can see the puck spinning. I can see when the goalie can't see a shot, because if a point shot is going to the net and I can't see the goalie, chances are he can't see the puck. So that gives me for example, a little bit of a nugget that I can give to the viewer, that there's no chance this guy saw this shot because I can't see him. Like, I physically can't see him. The stuff between the benches is not like it used to be. Like the coming to the bench used to be like, fighting through bus traffic, right? Like, and everybody's giving somebody a little stick and a little chirp and it's not like that anymore. There's some guys that are, more vocal than others. I use one earpiece. Most headsets are 2. I use one because I can hear a little bit more. You can't hear the far end of the bench. The building's too loud. Like, anyone that tells you, you can hear 10 players down, not a chance. You can't. When the coaches are talking
to the team, you can hear the coaches if they're yelling. You can hear the coaches yelling at the players.
You can hear the coaches yelling at the players. You can often hear the discussion with the officials, which sometimes goes a little more smoothly than others. It's really interesting. Some coaches don't say much. Some are really demonstrative. Like when you see a guy, you can tell when a coach is going to get heated by what's going on. And, you can look over there and you can just see he's getting revved up. And so I'll say to our director, let's make sure we get a camera on the coach here. And more often than not, your sense is correct that, okay, either the thing's going bad for his team or the calls are going bad, and he's going to explode out. And that's good. It's good TV. I don't know if they like it or not, but it's good TV. But I really like being down between the benches. To me, I feel part of the game. I feel engaged. I've done, I do a few upstairs, and I just don't like it as much. Maybe there'll be a time I go back up there. Like the other night, Miles Wood hit Brandon Carlo right in front of me. There's two really big guys, and Carlo's stick snapped. It went right over me and hit the glass. And it was hard enough, and they were in my area that Brandon Carlo said, "Ray, are you all right?" Like he knew that was close, and he didn't know what his stick hit. And so you get the old bup in your heart for a while. And this is no place for bravery, by the way, anymore. I've had my nose broken a bunch of times, and like, if there's traffic there, you're not going to see me leaning over. You're going to see me at the back. That's for sure.
Ray, we had Gord Miller on a couple episodes ago, and eloquent and great storyteller and that sort of thing. But, you've worked with him probably the most out of anybody, at least in the in-game level. What do you think makes him so special in the booth when he's calling a game?
A couple of things. One, he's got a great sense of the moment, of what's important and what's not. Like, don't forget, he doesn't get to, it's live. You don't get to think about what are the great moments of the game or how does this impact something else. You're doing it on the fly. And to start with, Gord's a smart guy. Like, he's really smart. And he's processing all of this while the game's going on. And he's got a great sense of the importance of a particular moment. That would be the first. Second, he's got incredible recall. Recall. Players going down the ice. Of course, he knows the name and the number and all that stuff, but he'll remember a stat or an important thing from 2 weeks before or 2 years before. And he can get it in and out of the play, I think, as well as anybody. That's number two. Number three is he has an appreciation of the absurd. And so look, we're not in surgery here. If something funny happens, I think part of our chemistry has always been that we can take something that is funny in the game because the viewer sees it and they're enjoying it, so we can enjoy it along with them. His call is excellent. Right. I mean, he just and because we've done so many games together, like, I never think about what he's doing. When we were doing a game, I never thought about it. I don't know what the hell Gord does for prep, but when we start, it's all done. He never thinks about what I'm doing because he knows that he's the same thing. He's like, I don't know what the hell Ray does, but when we get to puck drop, it's taken care of. And it's a great comfort. He's been an amazing partner to work with. And I really do miss the trips and the dinners. I enjoy never having cash. And so he always has to buy the press room meal. I love doing that. And I don't do it on purpose. I never brought, because I love getting Gord to open up his wallet is one of life's great pleasures. And so he'd have to pay. And I don't know if he told this story, but we have a couple that we really always giggle about. But so TSN at one point switched from just doing Canada plus the medal round games at the World Championship. So there's like 11 games to doing all 31. And so Gord, the first couple of days, we did 3 games a day. Like by the end of the day, you can't remember number 13 from Czechia, or is that number 13 from Finland? I got no idea.
He's probably a Walsh client if he's from Czechia. Just throwing that out.
Oh yes, don't worry. Allan's had a few research calls, and and so in the middle of the third game, this is like the third day, I say to our producer, I go, keep the camera on Gord. There's like 3 minutes left in the last game, 4 minutes, and it's a blowout. And he goes, what are you doing? And I go, I'm going to leave. And he goes, come on. I said, the game's over. Gord can handle it. I said, I'm just going to leave. So Gord's calling the game and he's looking over at me. I'm packing up my briefcase and putting my pens away and my papers. Then I put my jacket on take my headset off, and he's calling the game, and he's looking at me like, where are you going? And so by the time the game ended, I was already down at the production truck. I listened to Gordon call the last 30 seconds of the game. And so we just laughed because it was just a fun moment. Another one was Toronto. This was some years ago. They're losing 9-2 at home to Nashville. And again, I'm downstairs. He's upstairs. Oh, it was not a pretty night. And
bad.
Gord asks me a question, and I guess I don't answer because I didn't hear, because at this point I'm scrolling through Twitter or like there's nothing going on. There's what am I going to analyze? It's 9-2. Everybody in the building wants to go home. And so he said he looked down after he asked the question, saw that I wasn't paying attention at that moment, and he's like, I should just continue on. And he continued on the game because he was like, well, because he's not going to say anything. So.
Wow.
So what kind of prep do you go through to get ready for a game? What do you typically do?
Okay, so about a month out from each, I get my schedule in advance. So a month out, I'm reading the articles of the games for the teams that I'm going to do for the next month. And I have a folder on each team, and I copy and paste all what I think is the pertinent information. So a month out, I'm in advance. Then I talk the day of the game. I'll get a chance to talk to both coaches. We don't get access to the players like we used to, which is a little bit disappointing, but that's just the way it is. So now I've taken that information. I have very minimal stats because I don't think that's my job. I don't think the person at home wants me to quote everybody's shooting percentage and all that sort of stuff. I think I'm there to provide analysis, to provide some color to what's going on. So I've prepped. I have about 2 or 3 points on each player, a couple of interesting notes maybe on each, and I handwrite everything because it's a memory exercise. If I type it, it's just words on paper. And then, so I have one sheet on each team. That's all I have when I go into my spot. And I bet you I look at it twice a game because I remember it because that's part of my prep. And then I might check a number. Oh, a guy's got 1 goal in 14 games, or Connor McDavid's got 25 points in 12 games. I think he's got going now, or whatever his latest, latest run through the league is. And, but I don't think my job is to overload information. I just don't like that. The other thing I really try to do is I try to find, like, I think it's part of my job to say, ooh, that was a bad decision with the puck, but it's also my job to say what he could have done with it. It's really easy to say, that's a terrible play. He's got to do something better with it. Yeah, well, of course, he just passed it to the other team. Like, my job's to say his option was, it's a bad play. He could have gone up the wall with it, or maybe that was a play he should have just clanked it off the glass. Like, I'm supposed to have experience in the game that I'm able to relate to the people watching.
Well, playing 1,200 plus NHL games, that's the kind of insight that you would have that very few other people would.
You know what, Allan? I would say there's probably not much that happens on the ice, even though the game has changed completely from the one that I played, that I haven't, as a player, experienced it. And either any mistake that's been made, let me put it this way, I've probably made it on the ice. You play that long, like, you're going to, like, one of my best breakaway passes of my career was to Mats Naslund in overtime. Now, Mats played for Montreal and I played for Hartford, but like, I sent him in clean. It was a great, Mike Lee made the save. I was frozen at the blue line. I didn't move, and he stopped it. Then I think that was the next breath I took. So, like, anything that's happened, like, I've probably come across it, good or bad. And again, I think it's my job to try to relate that without talking about, when I played, because nobody wants to hear that either.
Right. I do like what, and this has been a feature of your broadcast because I've obviously seen a ton of them, Ray, is that you're very humble about your career, and you'll say something like that. You don't hesitate to bring, hey, I remember when I did that same thing and how it made me feel. And I think so much about sports and so much about broadcasting is relaying that feels like this, because sports, you watch sports because they make you feel. And one of the things that I've always wanted to ask you, because I used to, Ray, I'm old enough that I used to play with your avatar on video games. I used to draft you in fantasy draft in NHL 2000. But
sorry about that. Sorry about that.
No, you were great. You were great. But you've played in front of three of the most tortured fan bases in hockey history. We've got the Hartford Whalers, you got the New York Islanders, and you got the Atlanta Thrashers. And I kind of, if you got a couple sentences on each, I'd love to know. I know the Hartford fans are still wild. Islanders fans are obvious. Atlanta fans don't get the love that they deserve. Can you tell us a little bit about those three experiences?
Well, in Hartford, I mentioned right at the start here when we got called up, all those young guys, we all grew up together. From 20 to 26 or so, we were all together. Bunch of single guys that became a bunch of married guys with kids. And it was really, and we watched our careers grow. And a lot of us had really, really good careers. And it was a special place. I loved it in Hartford. I loved it. I loved living there. I was really sad to leave. Now things have changed in Hartford. It's not the same, it doesn't have the same business engine that it used to have. But the people in Hartford, they knew you. They loved coming to the games. It was a great, great place to be. The island was different because it's so spread out. But when you got to the Islander portion of it, like the passion of the Islander fan is almost unmatched. It really is. Like when we went to the semis in '93, like the feeling in that arena, that feeling around town, wherever you lived, because we all lived in little different hamlets, was it was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Now, they went from 1993 to 2016 without winning a playoff game or a playoff series. So when John Tavares scored in double overtime against Florida to win, I was broadcasting the game. The last time they won a series, I was on the ice. Like that, there was a lot of gray days there. And so I'm happy to see they're in the new building. And, I've never been there. I've never done a game there. I look forward to getting there. I love that. I really love, and I'm touched that people remember my time there in a good way. And then that brings us to Atlanta. We won 14 games that first year. Do you know how hard that is to do? There's 82 games. Jesus, we were terrible, terrible. And we had so much fun because at a certain point, if you don't have fun, you're just going to fall into depression all the time.
Right.
And so guys like Andrew Brunette and Mike Stapleton and Nat Domicelli and Chris Tamer, like when we run into each other, like we just laugh about some of the things that happen. Like literally, like honestly, guys, it's an entire podcast of stories that you just can't believe. Like that you wouldn't believe unless you were there, because how could you possibly win 14 games? like it was unbelievable. Like just, there was nothing. Well, the league gave the Thrashers, I think, the 12th best player off of every team. Like we had no players.
Oh yeah.
And so
it was not like Vegas and Seattle.
No. And so we weren't a threat. The only place we were a threat was in our own zone. Like we couldn't score. We couldn't defend. Our poor goalies were like, they didn't have a chance. I want to say nobody from the first year goalies in Atlanta played a game for another team in their career.
Oh.
Like that was, That was like the great, when you hear about a graveyard, like that was it.
Wow. But you were there for, I mean, you had, if I'm not mistaken, were you not there for the beginnings of Ilya Kovalchuk's career and things like that?
Heatley came in tail end of the first year. He signed from Wisconsin. Covey came in the next year. And like within 7 seconds, we're like, okay, these two guys are way better than anyone else that is around this team. Like they were on another planet. I mean, Covey, Heater was one of the game's best shooters. I mean, he could score. I mean, he could score on the one-timer from just about anywhere. Ilya was at a different level. First of all, he's a tank. He's like 220 pounds. He could skate, shoot, love to score. And he didn't want to do any interviews. He spoke decent English, but when the reporters would leave, he would go, guys, sushi, go sushi. And then we go for sushi. He could speak English. He just didn't want to do that. He was a terrific, they were really good teammates.
My favorite story about Atlanta was a first-year backup goalie was sitting on a milk crate in training camp. Big belly, long hair, was smoking a cigarette. And Atlanta had, 30 different owners? One of the owners was being led through by the GM, given a little tour. And he sees this guy, sweating like a pig, big belly, hairy belly, smoking a cigarette. And the owner goes, who's that? And the GM's like, our backup goalie.
Yeah, we were a collection. If you go through that first year roster, guys, I'm telling you, you'll go, don't know him. Oh, really? Like it's a who's who of, and you won't know them, which is really it was quite a season, I'll tell you. 14 wins. It's, as they said in Bull Durham, that's a lot of losses.
Why don't you tell us about the Little League World Series?
Oh, what an amazing thing. 1976, I'm from Trail, BC. At the time, about 11,000 people. We have this coach. His name was Andy Bileski. Andy was a legendary coach. Through all my minor hockey, into the time I played for Al Arbor, really, as much as I can think of, I learned more from Andy about teamwork and commitment and dedication and focus and do your job. Don't be the weak link in the chain. I learned more from Andy, my Little League coach, than anybody else. He was an amazing man. So when Andy coached, we had 19 guys try out for our team. You take 14. They cut 5 players. We won our little district area. We went to the provincials. We won 7 games in a row. We went to the Canadian tournament, and we're playing Ontario and Quebec, and big centers, lots of players, and we won. We went to the World Series, and so the first game was right after the ceremonies for the bicentennial in 1976, and I don't know, there had to be 10 or 12,000 people there. We're from a town of 11,000. It is one of, even with all the blessings of my life, it's one of the greatest things in my life. I just treasure playing there. I was a second baseman. I batted second. I bunted a lot. The next year I grew and I batted fourth and I hit a bunch of home runs and we made it to the Canadian finals again. But our town, Trail, has been to the Little League World Series 5 times, and it's something we're quite proud of.
Wow!
Oh, I didn't know that.
And Andy was the coach for all of them.
Wow! Well, Ray, you've been incredibly generous with your time, and I really appreciate you coming on with us. And the stories are incredible. Ray and I had a few bumps in the road at the very
inauspicious beginning, I would say. Yeah.
Very. And I've come to absolutely love you and have incredible amount of respect for you and the job that you do and who you are and your values and everything else. And I'm really honored, and we're all privileged to have you here.
Thank you, Allan. You know what? You brought up Gord Miller before, and I don't know what tournament it was at. And Gord said, basically in two different conversations, Ray, Allan, you two knuckleheads are going to meet each other and you're going to like each other, but you've got to meet each other instead of standing on either side of the fence. So I always tease Gord about that, because I'm like, Gord, we don't even like you anymore. We're just going to talk to each other. And so, but that was exactly where it turned, Allan. I don't know if you remember the tournament or not, but Gord said, you talk to him, you talk to him. And we quickly realized that the thing that was the biggest issue is the thing that makes us most similar. And that's a passion for what we do, a love for what we do.
Yeah.
And once we understood that, we're like, at least I did. I was like, oh, I get it. And so it's been 15 years that have been just awesome after as you say, there was a few bumps early on there.
Well, thanks again for coming on, and all the best.
All the best to you guys. Thanks a lot. And best of luck as you come up to show 50.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet? Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.